Hi, everybody. So I'm going to review this writing by Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, which is called Property is Theft, but I'm going to rename it and call it Capitalism is Theft because Proudhon actually does recognize property rights, but there are some property rights that are legitimate and then others which are illegitimate. And when property rights are used to exploit labor, then it is an illegitimate use of property. By the way, property rights are creations of the state. Therefore, capitalism cannot exist without statism. For those of you who don't know, Proudhon is the founding father of anarchistic philosophy. According to Proudhon, slavery is murder. It is the power to take from man his thought, his will, his personality. It is the power of life and death. To enslave a man is to kill him. Then, what is property? Property is theft. According to Roman law, property was defined as the right to use and to abuse one's own within the limits of the law. The proprietor may, if he chooses, allow his crops to rot under his foot, sow his field with salt, milk his cows on sand, change his vineyard into a desert, and use his vegetable garden as a park. Do these things not constitute abuse? According to the Declaration of Rights, property is defined as the right to enjoy and dispose of one's goods, income, and the fruit of one's labor. This definition does not differ from the definition used by the Romans. There are two different types of property rights: domain and possession. The domain of property refers to the legal right to own, whereas possession is a matter of fact. The validity of property rights depend on its origin. The right of occupation or of first occupancy is that which results from the actual physical, real possession of a real thing. I occupy a piece of land. The presumption is that I am the proprietor until the contrary is proved. Property rights are not innate, but acquired. Property rights are not grounded upon the constitution of man, but upon his actions. The earth is given to men and common for the purposes of life and bounty of heaven. But to divide it and appropriate one part of its produce to another, another part to another, must be the work of men who have power and understanding. The right of life implies a right to the necessary means of life, and that justice which forbids to taking away the life of an innocent man also forbids him from taking the necessary means of life. Man has the same right to defend his property as he does to defend his life. To deprive man of the fruit of his labor has the same effect as taking away his life or putting him in prison. The second basis for property rights is civil law. According to Proudhon, property rights which are based on civil law always leads to inequality. Every man, from the fact of his existence and in order to live, must have material for cultivation on which he may labor, and since the number of occupants varies continually with births and deaths, it follows that the quantity of materials which each worker may claim varies with the number of occupants. Consequently, the occupation is always subordinate to population. Essentially, because of population growth and the demands for their survival, one needs land in order to survive. Therefore, it is unjust to appropriate property against generations who do not yet exist. Property rights are only legitimate when they are acquired as a product of labor. Land belongs to the person who gets possession of it first. There is no right of possession for those who have abandoned said land. Land is created by God. God does not sell land. He gives it freely and is no respecter of persons. To honor man-made property rights is to regard some of God's children as legitimate while regarding others as bastards. Just as man has no authority to convey air or water, man has no authority to convey land. To sustain life, man needs to continually appropriate many things. Things such as air, light, water, and land are common to the human species and cannot be justly appropriated. Land is indispensable to our existence and consequently a common thing unsusceptible to appropriation. Land is much scarcer than other elements. Therefore, land must be regulated and not made for profit for a few, but in the interest and security of all. Property is the origin of all evil on earth and the first link in a long chain of crimes and misfortunes with the human race, and has endured since its birth. The right to possess real estate is part of a universal right which has never been totally destroyed, even at the most crucial periods. The proletariat, in order to gain the power to exercise it fully, has only to prove that he has always exercised it in part. The common man has the universal right to possess, give, exchange, loan, let, sell, transfer, or destroy. Property rights cannot be acquired by simple possession. Past era is not binding on a future. The institution of property, the work of ignorant reason, may be abrogated by a more enlightened reason. Property rights are inherently unjust because they prevent labor from acquiring natural wealth. Property rights are only legitimate when they are the product of labor. Property rights are legitimate based on a man's use of said property. Man creates property rights by turning unproductive land into something productive. By improving the land through his labor, man has imparted a new value to the property. Therefore, he has a right to the property. The right to produce includes the right to exclude. Maintenance is an incessant addition and a continuous creation. To cultivate is to give the soil its value every year. He who cultivates acquires property by good title, just as a tenant who pays rent. Whoever labors becomes a proprietor. The value which he creates is his sole property. The worker has a natural right to property in the thing which he has produced. Laborers create value, and this value is their property. You contributed to the production, you ought to share in the enjoyment. For a capitalist to pay a worker wages for his labor only remunerates the worker for property which he has abandoned to the capitalist. The worker has sold nothing and is ignorant of his rights. The capitalist has engaged in fraud and deceit. The capitalist has paid nothing for the immense power which results from the union and harmony of workers and the convergence and simultaneousness of their effort. While capitalists dwell in security and fear no lack of bread, laborers depend on the benevolence of the same capitalist to whom he has sold and surrendered his liberty. If the capitalist refuses to employ the worker, how can a worker live? The laborer has plowed an excellent field and cannot sow it. He has built an elegant and commodious house and cannot live in it. He has produced all and can enjoy nothing. The worker should acquire at the expense of the capitalist. All production being necessarily collective, the worker is entitled to a share of the products and profits commensurate with his labor. All accumulated capital being social property, no one can be its exclusive proprietor. These inferences are unavoidable and would suffice to inspire a revolution to our whole economic system, changing our institutions and laws. A capitalist means of production is dependent on those who labor for the capitalist. Therefore, the capitalist production is illegitimate. Capital can be exchanged, but it cannot be a source of income. Capitalists are committed to living without working at the expense of their workers simply because they own property. It is a man's labor which produces value to property. Until then, the salt of the sea the water of the springs, the grass of the fields, and the trees of the forest would have no value, and a capitalist would own nothing. Nature is a vast mass of material to be cultivated and converted into products. However, nature produces nothing until they are made into products by man. The capitalist producing nothing, neither by his own labor nor by his implement, and receiving products in exchange for nothing, is either a parasite or a thief. Economic equality cannot exist under capitalism. When property rights are abolished, the natural result will be communism. Communism is the deliberate negation of property rights. Members of the community have no private property, but the community itself is the proprietor, not only of goods, but also of persons and wills. Capitalism is the exploitation of the weak by the strong. Conversely, communism is the exploitation of the strong by the weak. Under communism, man is free to labor when he pleases, where he pleases, and as much as he pleases. Under communism, man is free to dispose of his own time, to be governed only by necessity, to choose his friendships, his creation, and his discipline, to act from judgment, not by command, to sacrifice himself through selfishness, not through servile obligation.